Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another special edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, we're at the Motor City Mad Mouth, and we talking some major league racing today. And this will be a high octane broadcast. Yes, guys, pun intended. And I am joined by Ron Renzy, the man with the beard. Okay, hello.
Hi, Scott.
Welcome back to the broadcast.
Thank you, Scott. Pleasure to be here.
And here we go again, Ken. We get to talk about the 12 hours of Sebring and then some. So always look forward to doing this broadcast. A little bit of a difference in timing since we had done this before. So in the fall, but nevertheless, I'm looking forward to getting back up there for a couple days with some high octane racing. And I know we're going to have ourselves a good time next weekend, Ken. I'm sure of that, right?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right, well, let's get going here. Well, first of all, Ken, what was it like to run the race in the fall?
Well, it was certainly different. Something we haven't done in 7 decades, so it was a different experience. The crowd was good, the weather was good. It was a great event. But as I've mentioned before, we are very happy to be back on our traditional date, the third Saturday in March, which coincides with spring break and a lot of other good things. So we could do without the fall event in the future, but it went well.
When we talk about that fall event, I know that when I was up there for this race here, did you feel that it didn't matter to you at all, Ken, that it was for the championship at all? Or does that really matter to you that a championship was at stake at your racetrack?
Well, it's a nice added value for the fans. It certainly adds a level of significance to the race. But again, in racing, we talk about date equity, and it's so important to have your event at the same time every year. If you constantly flip your dates around, the spectators can't plan around it. So we'll go back to our traditional date a week from Saturday, and we'll be happy to be back on that date for sure.
Ron, what do you want to add to this?
No, I just think it's a great race coming up. Ken, what do you think about the entries this year?
Well, we're really excited about it. The big story, of course, is having NASCAR 7-time champion Jimmie Johnson in the field. We're all curious to see how he does. And he did good in his first race at Daytona in the 24-hour race. They finished second place. So that's something I think we're all very anxious to see. But it's going to be a great manufacturer battle. In GT, you've got Corvette, BMW, and Porsche going at it. In the prototype division, we've got Mazda and Cadillac. So it's really it's going to be a great event. We've got 36 cars entered, a lot of big names. In addition to Jimmie Johnson, we have Kevin Magnussen, who was in Formula One in the last 3 years, and he's now joining our series. He's driving for the Chip Ganassi team, so we're real pleased to have him as well. A lot of Indy 500 winners, a lot of former Le Mans winners. It's going to be a really, really good event.
I want to backtrack to the fact that the race is what we call where it does belong. How much does that third week in March really, really mean to you? I know this is the 69th running of the Sebring race, the 12-hour, the mobile 12 hours. But, you talk about not moving dates around. Of course, we know 2020 was obviously a year where if anything could be switched, it was that. But talk about the real, true, significant meaning of this race being back where it belongs, being the second event of 2021.
Well, I think you have to look at it from a historical perspective, but also from just the local community. The Sebring and Highlands County area looks for this event every year. It's the center of the world for this area. And to have to move it under the circumstances that we did is very disruptive. I mean, look at it from the standpoint of hotels, restaurants, and traveling, and schools, and volunteers. And I mean, you could just go on and on. The implications of moving a traditional date to a completely different time of year. So it's very, very important that we go back to our March event. We traditionally follow Daytona, which happens in late January, early February, and I think everybody plans their vacations around Sebring. Our fans are very loyal and very dedicated. We have about 1,500 reserved spots around the track, all sold out. And those people guard those spaces. I mean, they will them to their relatives when they die because they don't want them to ever get out of the family. It's prime real estate. And it's just all part of the tradition of Sebring. Sebring in March, the harbinger of spring for motorsports. So we're very, very happy to be back.
Well, when you talk about that, you almost bring up a familiar tone like the Green Bay Packers. Oh, they had these tickets down from generations to generations.
Yeah,
I
sure.
realize that in your situation, are we comparing Sebring to the Green Bay Packers? Well, I guess to some extent I probably can. They're both shrine historical events that have withstood decades and decades and decades. So do you feel that in your mind compares to a Green Bay Packer type of tradition when you connect the families and the generations?
Well, I think, Sebring is more than a race. It's an event, it's a party, it's a gathering, it's a get together. And, I'm sure the Green Bay Packer games are the same. The tailgating, the parties, the camaraderie between the fans, you get to, see them every other Sunday or whatever. So there are similarities. The thing about Sebring is that it involves a lot of traditions in motorsports. And I think the manufacturers who are involved in racing, it's very important to them to have a stable schedule, a promotable schedule, and one that doesn't conflict with other forms of racing. As you know, conflicts happen occasionally. And then when you have a situation like we did with the COVID, everybody was scrambling, rescheduling races, and then we ended up conflicting and so forth. So when we go back into this groove of where we normally are, there's less conflicts, a little more stability. So, hopefully we'll always be the third Saturday in March. And I think everybody's really happy to be back.
Now, I saw a recent promotion that I put up on social media that you guys were selling like a 7-8 day package for like $2,500. Is that
That's
what it
the
was?
hotel. That's the hotel.
Right, I know. So I want you, not since this is an opportunity for us to get this out there, go out there and let people know what that package was, including the hotel. I have to admit, since I'm really enjoy being a part of the media, if I wasn't a member of the media and I had the extra money, would I love to spend 8 days out there? Yes, but I'm very happy with the arrangement that I have coming up there for 2 days because it conflicts with my crazy man style of driving back and forth a couple of days. But let's talk about our regular race fans about that package. This is your opportunity, Ken, to put a little bit of value. Are there any packages left out there for the event?
I believe it's sold out now, but we're unusual. Very few tracks have their own hotel, and we have a 122-room hotel. It's called Hotel 7, and the reason it's called 7 is because it's overlooks Turn 7, which is the most famous turn at the track. It's also known as the hairpin. But what they were offering was a package for $2,500, basically for the entire race week. I'm pretty sure it's sold out. You can certainly call the hotel and find out. But even aside from the 12-hour week, there's a lot of events here at Sebring, a lot of club events, a lot of testing, corporate events, and it's a great place to stay. And I'd highly recommend people look into that. It's really convenient. It's a nice hotel, nice bar, nice restaurant. So by all means, we love people to come here at other times aside from the 12 hours.
Sounds good. All right. So you talk about Indy 500 winners. So I'm going to ask you and put you on the spot. How many former Indy 500 winners will be in this race, Ken?
We'll have to look at the lineup here, but I know Simon Pagenaud is one of them. And also, let me get the entry list here.
There you go. You had me.
That's this weekend. Hey, let's talk about this weekend for a minute here. How about that?
That's okay. Well, we'll talk about this weekend, and then while you come up with that list, I know the last race, I believe there were 6 of them, if I remember right.
There was. We had Scott Dixon here as well. Let's see. Looking over the entry list now. Chip Ganassi Racing has, in addition to Kevin Magnussen, the Formula One driver I mentioned, Indy 500 500 winner Scott Dixon is entered. The number 5 car has Sebastian Bourdais, who's a well-known IndyCar driver. The number 10 car, which is the Konica Minolta Acura, has Indy 500 winner Alexander Rossi driving. Jimmy Johnson, of course, is in the number 48 Cadillac, 7-time NASCAR champion. And just a little bit of trivia, the last NASCAR champion to win at Sebring was in 1984, Terry Labonte. So there's a little trivia for you.
That's interesting.
Juan Pablo Montoya, another Indy 500 winner, is in the number 60 Acura. So those are the Indy 500 winners. We also have, let's see, we've got Japanese driver Kobayashi, who has won both Le Mans and Daytona, which is a pretty good accomplishment. We have the defending champions are back at the Mazda, and this is their farewell season. Unfortunately, they're not going to be running after this season, so they're returning to defend their title. So we've got quite a lineup. That's just in the prototype class, so it's looking really good.
Well, you had 6 Indy 500 winners, but you don't know exactly what you have right now going into this.
I think we have five
Okay.
this year.
Sounds good. All right, well, let's get into some NASCAR. You talk about Terry Labonte being the last NASCAR guy, and Jimmy Johnson. You know, we talked about this when I was there during the fall about Jimmy Johnson, and I think you predicted that he was going to make the trip. So what is the response like with Jimmy Johnson going into endurance racing, knowing full well he has more time on his hands, that he isn't running a full NASCAR circuit?
Well, it's always great to have someone with the name recognition of a NASCAR star, certainly. And you know, normally the 12 Hours of Sebring conflicts with a NASCAR race. In fact, it does this year with the Atlanta race. But since Jimmy has retired from NASCAR, he's now able to run. Now, in years where there wasn't a conflict, we've had other NASCAR drivers. You might remember Daytona 500 winner Michael Waltrip competed at Sebring in the 12 hours, I think in 2012. But if you go back to 1986, we had a very interesting incident in the GT class. Bill Elliott and Ricky Rudd, 2 names you certainly have heard of, were headed to victory in the GT class, and their team cars, driven by Scott Pruitt and Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, were in second place. And Bruce Jenner ran out to the pits and held up the old pit board, you know, to pit by accident. And so Ricky Rudd came in the pits thinking he was supposed to pit, and that allowed Bruce Jenner's car to win the race. So that was always a very controversial and interesting little end to the 12 hours back in 1986. And that prevented Bill Elliott and Ricky Rudd from getting the win. So some interesting things have happened at Sebring over the years, that's for sure.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and recap the 2020 race while we have an opportunity. But before you do that, though, I want you to go ahead and talk about the event that's taking place over this weekend, since we were doing that there. You have a race weekend this weekend. So what is that, the prelude to the big event next week? Is that correct?
Well, we have a new kickoff event, which is Saturday. And the gates open at 8 o'clock. The admission is only $20. Kids are free. And it's just Saturday only, and it's 3 races. You have the Emsa Prototype Challenge race, we have the Porsche Sprint Challenge, and we also have a really cool endurance, vintage endurance series called Masters of Endurance. This is sort of this new kind of way to kick off the entire week and get fans all hyped up and so forth. It's also it's really a good event because it's a lot more relaxed atmosphere. It'll be a lot easier to move around. So if you've never been to Sebring, you want to take a look, you know, go to the different turns, look at the facility. This is really a great time to do it without the, you know, gigantic crowds that you'll have the following weekend for the 12 hours. If you've never been to Sebring, I highly recommend. This is a great time to find out about the race. We'll have our souvenir vendors there with the unveiling of our 2021 merchandise. And it's going to be a fun event. The weather forecast is just fantastic. So it should be a great event.
All right, now you can recap the 2020 race.
Well, as you mentioned, it was in November for the first time ever. And winning Sebring for the very first time was the Mazda team. And interesting because Nissan and Honda had won the race. And so there was kind of a rivalry there. And with Acura and Honda and Mazda, all the Japanese manufacturers. And Mazda has been trying desperately to win either Daytona or Sebring for a number of years. And finally, they broke through with this really big win. It was actually a really good battle because Cadillac had really dominated most of the race. But Mazda used a really good pit strategy. One of the drivers on the winning Mazda was Ryan Hunter-Reay, an Indy 500 winner. In fact, he's the one who isn't here this year, so that instead of 6, we have 5. But it was a really historic occasion for Mazda. And right after they won the race, they shipped the car to Japan for their museum. And it's just as it won at Sebring, covered with the dirt and the oil and the grime and everything. And they have it on display just like that, because that's probably the second biggest win in the history of the company. They did win Le Mans back in 1991, but they've been dying to win in the United States, and they finally did it.
Very good. All right, so what are you expecting in 2021? I know last year people were a little apprehensive about going to the race because of COVID-19. We really didn't know what to expect in terms of safety. And yet I think that the race weekend went off pretty well, knowing full well that there were a lot of variables involved. So, in terms of 2021, there's a vaccine out there. In fact, there's 3 of them out there. So what are the expectations going into 2021 in more ways than one? And Ron, this is an opportunity for you to incorporate once Ken tells us what we're up against here.
Well, we're running this event just as we did in November, in that we are requiring temperature screenings at the front gate. Every fan has to wear a mask at the front gate. We also are requiring masks in the vendor area and any food area. But we're still limiting some areas. Our hospitality areas are at 50% capacity. So we are still following a lot of the guidelines that we did in November. We do think, things are certainly going to be loosening up in the coming months. And hopefully by 2022, we'll be back to normal. We are not allowing fans in the paddock this year again, as we did in November, which is, I know, a disappointing thing, because one of the beauties of Sebring is the fact that fans and the teams can mingle and so forth. But Emsa has decided to again keep the fans out of the paddock. They've created what they call the Emsa bubble. So all the drivers and crews, race officials with Emsa are basically isolated from the rest of the people here. So they're still taking some precautions. We're still taking it very seriously, but being primarily an outdoor event, we want people to have fun and enjoy the event. And I think it's going to come off really well. I'm anticipating a little bit bigger crowd than we had in November. And then next March, we'll be back at full speed.
What kind of a crowd do you feel that you did have in November?
Well, NASCAR doesn't release attendance figures. I would say we were probably a little bit less than 2019, which was the year we had the joint event with the World Endurance Championship. This year, we hope to top November. And then in 2020, when the WC does return, we hope to be back at full speed. You may have heard the big announcements over the last few weeks that Ferrari is returning with a factory sports car team in 2023, along with Audi, Porsche, Acura, Peugeot, Toyota, and 3 or 4 other smaller manufacturers. So there's a big renaissance in endurance racing that's going to kick off in 2023. So let's hope that all of this COVID is done by then, certainly.
Yes, but you don't have any rough idea about what the crowds were, or would that be something that would be a pure guess?
Pure guess. I mean, I've heard figures ranging from 60,000 to 80,000. I don't know how many people are here. It's a lot. You've seen it.
Oh, yeah. All right,
It,
Ron.
No,
I,
I think it's very exciting. I can't ask you, as far as I know, this is for those who can't make it, it's going to be on NBC Sports, Flag the Flag. Is that something that's new to Sebring, or has it always been covered the whole 12 hours?
well, the event has in recent years has been the entire race has been covered. However, I will say it's not continuous in that like the first 2 hours is on NBC Sports, and then 3 hours is streamed on their NBC Sports app, and then they come back to NBC Sports, etc. But this is very important to us and our sponsors, and especially having the first 2 hours on NBC Sports is really important. So fans who can't make it, shame on you, but you can watch the entire race either on TV or streaming it. And it's also broadcast on XM radio, the whole race.
Well,
And that's also, I'm sorry, that's also available to fans at the track. They can actually listen to it or maybe watch a streaming to kind of get a full view of everything that's going on, right?
Absolutely. We also have our own FM station here at the track. So
Wow.
you can hear the race broadcast on that as well. So and we have jumbotrons around the facility and so forth. So it's real easy to follow what's going on. If you're new to endurance racing, I think we talked about this last time, we try to make it as complicated as possible with all these different classes.
Mhm.
But all the cars have a digital readout on the side that shows what position they're in, which is really cool.
That's neat.
We were one of the first sanctioning organizations to do that. So when you watch a car go by, it'll not only have the car number, but it'll also have a digital number on it that shows what position they're in. And that's pretty high tech.
That's
Well,
awesome.
amazingly enough, and I know we've talked about this throughout the broadcast so far, Ken, I get the feeling that we're looking at a bigger, more comfortable turnout, referring to the COVID-19 situation, because again, now you have more vaccines out there. Obviously, people have to wear their mask, social distance, and so forth. But do you feel like this will be a more comfortable situation for the fans to come out compared to what we dealt with in November?
Without question, we've had a number of people tell us that, that have gotten a vaccine, including myself. And they're they feel more comfortable about it. It's human nature. Once you have the vaccine, you feel more comfortable about it. And I think, people who aren't comfortable will gladly move their tickets to, next year. And we've done that. So we want everybody to be happy, be comfortable. I think this event is going to be really, really well attended. And I think fans have been very cooperative here. You saw in November, everybody did what they're supposed to. There was nobody that was giving us any kind of trouble in that respect. We all understand that we're in this together. So it went very well. We were very happy with it.
Yeah, amazingly enough, when we talk about that, I felt very comfortable. I wasn't sure what getting in there, but I know that since I work with the Florida Panthers, the Marlins, the Jacksonville Jaguars, that places like yours protect us guys in the media to make sure that we're not exposed to larger numbers. So I felt very comfortable being up there. And obviously now that we're 90 days along in the process, I can only anticipate how much better it's going to get. When you talk about streaming though, and this is the one thing that we're even striving for here at the network, is did you know that 60 Minutes is streaming at all?
No.
Yeah, they're going to be doing it. And the NHL got that new TV deal, and ESPN Plus is going to be part of streaming. So that's where it's going. So
Yeah, that's the future, no doubt.
yeah, without a doubt. So I can assure you that if everything goes according to plan, our next broadcast will be streaming. But we're all right now, but I have big plans for what we're doing here. So let's talk about some of the particulars in this race. Since I've gone out there and I've come a long way since I started this a couple of years ago with you. Okay, I really feel, and I take a lot of pride because I want to get better at this stuff. But now I want to talk to you about Wayne Taylor Racing. They've won 3 straight Rolex 24s in January. So why don't you explain to our audience, Ken, about Wayne Taylor Racing?
Well, Wayne Taylor has been in motorsports a long time. He won the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1996 as a driver. And then he became a team owner. He had, for the last several years, raced Cadillacs, the Cadillac prototypes. He won Sebring in 2017 as a team owner, and his drivers happen to be his sons, Jordan and Ricky, both of which have gone on to drive for factory teams. Ricky drove for Penske, and Jordan drives for Corvette. But this year, Wayne Taylor Racing has switched to Acura. And their first race with Acura was at Daytona. And what did they do? They went out and won it. Amazingly successful team. The team is in Indianapolis. Wayne and his sons live in Orlando. So the kind of the administrative part of the team is in Florida, and the actual race shop is in Indianapolis. But they have been tremendously successful. If you win 3 Daytona Rolexes and win the 12 Hours of Sebring, you've got something going for you. And they are the favorites to win here.
Well, I'll tell you what, many years ago, my Aunt Judy used to own a Corvette. She used to get one every year. So that leads me to where I'm going here. We're talking about Corvette racing. Although they haven't won one recently, they have 11 wins. So for all you folks out there that realize that Corvettes are not only good to drive your auto insurance up, they're also good on the track when you don't have to go out there and get busted by Smokey looking for the bandit. So I see a few little references here. But let's talk about the success, Ken, of Corvette racing. I mean, they definitely go out there and have done an unbelievable job through the years. I read about them every week when I get the Emsa updates.
Well, there's no team in endurance racing that has a more loyal following than the Corvettes. The Corvette fans are fanatics. And of course, it's a good old American iron out there running. So a lot of American race fans are very proud to watch Corvette. And they go to Le Mans and they race against the best teams, and they've done very well. Corvette did win the season opener at Daytona very convincingly. They won here in our July race last year. They didn't do too well in November. They didn't need to because they had clinched the championship. But they come here, with a 2-car team, and they'll be up against their rivals in the GTLM class, BMW and Porsche. So it's going to be a really hotly contended race. But Corvette has a fantastic history at Sebring. They have wins at Sebring going back to 1956, which is pretty amazing. I think they have 32 class wins at Sebring over the years. And then Corvette racing, the current evolution of the team, I think has 7 races wins at Sebring. So they're the favorites in GTLM, both literally and just from a fan standpoint. Fans absolutely love Corvette.
Another manufacturer that blows me away is Porsche. I know they're a German manufacturer, and by a wide margin, they've amassed 98 wins at Sebring, and they started coming here in 1955. They have more Sebring wins than all the other WeatherTech championship manufacturers combined. I'm going to go over this list because I am totally impressed. Folks, if you really want to realize the heavy hitters that come to Sebring and are a big part of endurance racing, as we call in the sportscasting business, let's go to the scoreboard. All right. Well, we got Porsche at 98, Chevrolet 40. I got to believe that Corvette's a part of that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Mazda 14, BMW 7, Acura 3, Aston Martin 3, Cadillac 2, Lamborghini 2, Mercedes 2. Folks, I have to admit, many years ago, I used to drive a few Cadillacs, the North Star engine. And I can tell you right now, that's a fast car, although I don't know if we'll see it on these. But when I go to that checklist of manufacturers, Ken, if this doesn't validate the fact that there is a whole lot of money involved, okay, that list pretty much sums it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the manufacturer participation in Emsa and in Sebring, I think they have 17 manufacturers now actively competing. And Porsche is the king of endurance racing. They've won overall at Sebring 18 times, which is absolutely amazing. They had a streak of 11 straight wins here. And then you look at the class wins, they've got like 63 class wins. They're just an amazing manufacturer when it comes to motorsports. They have built their brand around motorsports. But the measure of success in Emsa is the factory, the manufacturer participation. And when you have, Cadillac and Mazda and Nissan and Toyota, Lamborghini, BMW, the list goes on and on. It really validates the importance of endurance racing, both to the manufacturers from a proving ground standpoint, but also just from a marketing standpoint. They're out there to sell cars. That's the whole deal. But they're also there to develop cars, and endurance racing is the place to do it. The beauty of Emsa and Sebring is it's relevant. You can go to Formula One or an IndyCar race, very cool racing, but the cars really aren't relevant to what you drive on the street.
Right.
Sports car racing, it's the cars, we drive. You go to a dealership and buy them. So there's a relevance. That's why fans are so loyal to their manufacturers who come to Sebring. You'll see them with Ferrari flags and Porsche flags and so forth. So it's a different type of racing, but the manufacturer participation is really, really well subscribed to in our sport.
What kind of success do you anticipate Ferrari bringing to the equation?
Well, the announcement a few weeks ago that Ferrari is going to have a factory prototype is amazing. They haven't had a factory prototype in over 50 years. They have basically concentrated on Formula One. They've had GT cars entered over the years, but to win overall with a prototype, they just haven't been involved. And the announcement that in 2023 Ferrari is going to be in endurance racing, I mean, that is just a game changer for everybody. That lights a fire under a lot of other manufacturers too, who will want to go up against them. So right now we've got 7 or 8 manufacturers already signed up for 2023. It is going to be a real battle, and the fans are going to benefit from it. It's going to be spectacular.
What about Rolls-Royce? Have you ever had any participation from Rolls-Royce at all?
Well, Bentley, which at one time was part of Rolls-Royce, I think they split up a few years ago, but Bentley has been very active in racing. They had a factory prototype at Sebring in 2003. They won Le Mans that year, and they've been in GT racing for quite a while. It's a very small company. Like Aston Martin, it's really almost like a boutique brand. They don't make that many cars. They're very expensive cars, obviously. But, to see Bentley and Audi and Porsche and Nissan and Toyota and Cadillac and Ford and so forth, all battling, it's a beautiful thing.
Have you ever watched Beverly Hills Cop?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, good old Eddie Murphy made that reference about the old Ferrari, and Gil Hill, who was his boss, certainly made sure that he, that was a great show. Of course, it doesn't hurt. I have a Detroit bias about Beverly Hills Cop, and we're talking about wrecking up a Ferrari. We're having a great old time at Beverly Hills. Come on, folks, you know what? Ferrari's getting in the endurance racing game, but once upon a time, Beverly Hills Cop and the old intrigue of Hollywood certainly got involved with it too. When you talk about holding the event in the spring, do you feel that last year you didn't get as much media coverage as you normally would during that spring time frame? I know a couple of people that I am hoping to get together with this year. I think Walt, what was his name? Hijack or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, we've been in contact.
He'll be back this year. Yep.
Yeah. We've been communicating on LinkedIn. So, Walt told me he's going to be there, so I'm hoping I'll see him up in the press box. But getting back to my point in terms of coverage, how would you describe the coverage of Sebring in 2020? And then we'll take that question, Ken, a step further about what your expectations are during the normal time frame here in the spring of March 2021.
Well, just to show you what toll COVID did, you were there in 2019 when we had the big tent.
Right.
And we had about 280 journalists from all over the world. Well, in 2020, obviously, with the travel restrictions, the international media just couldn't even come here. So, that goes without saying. It took a toll on us from that standpoint, but it did also create, a different type of media coverage. A lot more, specialty websites in the motorsports industry. A lot of people covering it remotely because they had no choice. So it kind of changed the dynamics of it a little bit. A lot of PR people for the teams actually covered the event, worked the event from their homes. They had no choice. So while the coverage was probably less in terms of bodies here, the coverage in terms of, actual mentions of Sebring was pretty much the same as in other years. So as much as COVID hurt, I think it changed the type of coverage more than just eliminating coverage.
Well, it's funny how you say that too, because I covered the Super Bowl virtually, in Tampa. And because of our relationship, at least last year with NFL Communications, it opened up an opportunity for us to participate in certain events. Do you expect there to be a lot of remote coverage, and how much actual coverage are you going to get in person compared to what we had back in November?
It'll be roughly the same as November. Emsa is doing a lot of Zoom press conferences, driver interviews via Zoom. All the post-race and pre-race interviews will be on Zoom. So right there, that tells you that, there is going to be a lot of people working the race remotely. We're keeping the capacity of the media center down like we did November to, about 40%. So, it'll look like November. I think the coverage will probably be slightly more because we're back on our normal date. And I think in 2020, you'll see us back in the big tent maybe. So we'll see what happens.
Now, in terms of face-to-face, there won't be any face-to-face interviews like there was before.
No.
Everything's going to be up in our regular friendly confines circle until, and hopefully at some point or another down the road, we're able to do more videos with the drivers. But obviously that won't be the case this year because we're still, in that little gray area. Is that correct?
Correct. You got it.
Ron, what do you want to add?
No, I just think that Sebring is such an iconic race over the years and has adapted over the years. How do you foresee the changes in IMSA with the GTLM going away and DPI changing into LMDH? And is that something exciting to look forward to, or what do you think?
Well, I think the change of GTLM was just necessitated by the manufacturers themselves. By moving the Corvette and BMW down to GTD and then dividing that into pro and amateur, I think it just creates more competition, which is what we're looking for. Let's face it, Corvette, doesn't have as much competition as they normally would, especially after Ford left the series, the Ford GTs left. And then the factory Porsches are gone, for now. There's some private Porsches running. So, to answer your question, I think long run, it's a good thing. It creates more competition. As far as in the prototype ranks, as I mentioned, in 2 years, it is going to explode. And the reason it's 2 years is because it takes manufacturers 2 years to develop these cars. It's not like we can just, flip a switch and they show up. So I think that the changes, are great long term. Next year will probably be roughly similar to this year in terms of car counts and the type of cars. But then in 2023, you're going to see just a huge explosion.
It's exciting.
Okay. I want to go over a couple of interesting brands, since I know that this type of racing is synonymous in terms of developing cars for the street. I know many years ago when we were growing up, the Camaro was big, the Ford Mustang was big. Did you ever see a whole lot of involvement with the Camaro, the Ford Mustang, or any prominent manufacturers? And I'll follow it up with some American manufacturers, since I know we have a lot of internationals. Start with this first.
Now,
Well, the Ford Mustang is active in the Michelin Pilot Challenge Series. It's the race that runs the day before the 12 hours.
Okay.
So they're very active. Camaros are in several series. Of course, the focus of Camaro is in the NASCAR Cup Series. That's really their bread and butter, if you will. But the thing with Ford and Chevy is they're kind of cyclical in their participation. You saw Ford with their GT program, a fantastic program. which ended 2 years ago. So Ford is not really doing a lot right now, but they've already been rumored to be looking at LMDH and prototypes and so forth. So they'll be back up in a few years. Chevy has been a constant in terms of Corvette, but they haven't really been in the top tier. But GM, of course, has Cadillac, which is one of the top teams. So it's very important for our sport that the American manufacturers stay involved in road racing. Obviously in NASCAR, they have a presence, but it's very important to fans that they have some representation, and that's why Corvette has such a great following, because when you go to Le Mans, you basically see almost all European and Japanese brands, but there's Corvette always trying to uphold the Detroit pride, and it's good to see American manufacturers in the sport.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about the big three. General Motors, obviously, you've got Cadillac and you have Chevrolet involved. You're all right there. But what about Chrysler and Ford? So why don't you follow up with Chrysler and Ford?
Chrysler has disappeared.
They have. Okay.
They left NASCAR quite a while ago, and then when they stopped making the Viper, which was pretty successful in our series, they had nothing. And then, of course, they've gone through some acquisitions, I guess Fiat and so forth. So Chrysler has just not been a factor really at all.
And of course, you've already talked about Ford. And what about Honda? Do you ever get much play out of Honda at all? I know it's a great vehicle to drive on the road, but I don't know if they're actively involved in a lot of the high-tech racing that we do. Let's face it, the animal that we have here, which is one of the things I love about endurance racing and what we do with Sebring and so forth. And I'm just always so intrigued and amazed by it than anything else. But what about Honda? Are they a player in this?
Well, Acura, of course, is a Honda brand. It's their upscale brand, and very active in motorsports. Of course, they're one of the top prototype teams, and they also run in the GTD class. Honda runs cars in the Michelin Pilot Challenge, which is the series that runs the day before the 12 hours. And Honda and their brand Acura is really one of the most active brands in motorsports, and they have always believed in, as they say, improving the breed by racing. Honda, of course, has been in Formula One supplying engines, and in IndyCar supplying engines. So they're very mindful of the importance of motorsports from both a marketing and development standpoint. And right now, the brand that they are pushing in the US as far as racing is Acura.
Interesting. Right, Ron?
No, I just think it's great to have all these manufacturers involved, and it doesn't seem to be going away. So what do you think are the fan favorites? Which class do you think most of the fans like to come to see?
Well, that's really a good question, because while most people focus on the overall winning car, which makes sense, and therefore you would follow Cadillac and Acura and Mazda, I think the appeal, the identity, the relevance that I mentioned earlier is really in the GT classes. And I think that's where you see the real brand loyalty. You see the Corvette fans and the Porsche fans and the BMW fans, probably the three biggest fan groups. But now you have Lexus fans. I mean, Lexus is very active in GT racing. Lamborghini, a very exotic brand. So I think the GT classes have this allure that really attracts people, despite the fact they're really not running for the overall win.
I can only imagine what merchandise sales are like with all these particular manufacturers, Ken. I mean, let's not kid yourself. You're not dealing with small change. We're talking about Lamborghini in here. We're talking about Porsche, Corvette, you name it. Talk to me a little about manufacturing, the manufacturer vendor sales, because you're representing some first-class companies.
Well, it's like any other sport, whether it's the NBA or Major League Baseball or whatever. Merchandising is such an important part of it, licensing and merchandising. And it's no different in racing. I mean, you've been to NASCAR races and you see all its NASCAR merchandise. You know, it's focused on Ford and Chevy and Toyota. And it's the same at Sebring. People buy Ferrari swag and Porsche swag and Corvette swag. And it's a way of showing loyalty, just like a fan buys a Miami Heat jersey or a, you know, Tampa Bay Rays jersey. So it's a huge part of it. You know, licensing and merchandising is really financially, I'm sure, a lot bigger than most people would think.
All right, everybody, just so you know, this is the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth, Motor City Madmouth. We're talking motorsports with Ken Breslauer. Ken is the track historian for the Sebring. And of course, Ron Renzy is my partner in crime wherever I need him. No partner in crime. I don't want any legal people to get involved, although whatever, go figure that out. But this is our broadcast here with the 12 Hours of Sebring, a race that is so dear to my heart. I love going to Sebring. I encourage anybody, if you haven't been there before, put it on your bucket list. I wrote a story on there. Ken saw it was a bucket list item. I'm anxious to see what I'm going to put together. Then again, what's nice about covering the event is you have about 12, 15 hours to figure out what you're going to write about anyways. You have a long time. You think about an endurance race with a driver. What about the people covering the sport, let alone guys like you that have to put on the production?
Yeah, it's endurance racing is a different animal, as you've experienced, and you know, you were a real newbie a few years ago, and now you're becoming an expert, which is starting to scare me, by the way. But it's a different type of sport, no doubt. You know, whether it's a 24-hour race or a 12-hour race or even a 6-hour race, you cover it differently, you write about it differently. There's a different strategy. You have 3 cars per driver. It's a lot different. It's a lot of things to learn about it, and I think you're getting it. Yeah, I can just see that expertise level rising there.
Well, it's your fault that you're scared because all you did was teach me pretty darn good, Mr. Breslauer. Seriously, man. I mean, I really love it. I talk about it all the time. If you think Don King used to promote boxing, I like to promote endurance racing. I'm still waiting to get in a vehicle and drive around that track a little bit. I know you and I have some things to work on when we come up there again. But hey, you know what? Just because I have a good teacher from you, Ken, and I'm scaring you, that means you're doing your job, and you're a good teacher, and I don't think I'm a bad student, and I'm going to get Renzy out there soon enough.
Yeah, I think you're a convert. I think you're starting to appreciate it. And you know, look, in all seriousness, it's an acquired taste. You know, it's a sport that's probably more complicated than it should be. It can intimidate people with all the different classes and all the rules and this and that. But the bottom line is, if you're interested in cars, it's a great thing to experience. Kids love it too. You see so many kids out here that just love seeing these cars going around. And the beauty of endurance racing, at least at Sebring, is they run day and night, rain or snow or whatever we got, man, they will run in it. It's not like NASCAR, you know, where most races, if it rains, they just stop. We keep going, no matter what the conditions. And that's what endurance racing is all about. You know, it's like really driving on the road. You experience all different types of weather. You drive at night, in the day, and in the case of the Sebring circuit, you have a bumpy circuit, just like the roads you drive in. All the roads you drive in aren't perfectly smooth, you know. So we are a test bed for the motorsports industry, and fans want to see that. They want to see relevant cars and a relevant track. You know, that's always been the complaint about Formula One, is the tracks are so smooth, so perfect, you know, that you know, how does that test a car? You know, it's like driving on glass. They're perfect. The Sebring will test your car, and it might shake your kidney stones out too. But
Sebring will test a lot of things, but you know, you do bring up a lot of interesting points, though, that a lot of people probably don't recognize. And the fact that you're going to drive, whether it's raining or it's not, for all I know, if you were up north, you'd drive in the snow if you could. But you know, you don't have to worry about it because you don't drive in the snow. But the fact of the matter is you do drive, whether it's raining, what you do drive at night, you do test during the day when it's hot. And that's the thing that people have to realize, that during the course of a 12-hour race, whether it's 12, 24, or whatever it may be, you are tested in every way, shape, or form, from weather conditions to endurance, being in shape. We know the drivers have to be in extraordinary incredible shape to be able to do this for a long time. So I think that's pretty cool too. So, when we summarize this broadcast a little bit, I'm really glad that Jimmy Johnson is coming down there, and I hope that we see more and more NASCAR big names. You're always going to get your Indy 500 people, and on this broadcast, you've been able to shed a little bit more light on the NASCAR drivers that are in the past. And what I've always learned about it, and that's a byproduct of you're teaching me this whole endurance thing, which I'm really loving every minute of the whole thing, is this. Okay, this circuit is not a circuit where that drivers go out to pasture. This is a circuit that when they're done racing their full-time circuits, that they can make a nice smooth transition to doing what they really, really love to do, and be challenged in a different way.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, look at Fernando Alonso, Formula One star, world champion. So what does he do? He goes into endurance racing for the Toyota team. He comes to Sebring. What does he do at Sebring? He sets the fastest lap in the history of the track, wins the race. Now he's going back to Formula One next year. So these guys, they respect the importance of endurance racing, and it's different. It's a different type of racing, but if you're fast, you're fast. And I'm sure Jimmy Johnson's going to be fast.
I'm going to throw a couple of NASCAR names at you, maybe two or three. Did Jeff Gordon ever take the plunge into the circuit at all?
Not at Sebring, but he did at Daytona, and he won the 24 Hours of Daytona, I think 2 or 3 years ago, driving for Wayne Taylor. And Jeff Gordon, he was a good road racer when they raced at Watkins Glen and Sonoma on the NASCAR circuit. He won several road course races. So he certainly, he's a good crossover driver. If you look at the history of the sport, you take Dan Gurney, for example. He won in Formula One, Indy cars, sports car racing. And then he went to Riverside every year for the NASCAR race and won like 7 times. So these drivers, they can apply their talents to almost any form of racing. It's really impressive. Some of these drivers are just incredibly talented.
I'll throw a couple more names at you. Tony Stewart.
Tony Stewart, he did run Daytona as endurance race. He never won it, but he won plenty of NASCAR road races, and he was one of the better road racing stock car drivers. So it's a shame he didn't run here, but I'm sure he would have been fast.
Robbie Gordon.
Oh, Robbie Gordon. He ran at Sebring many times.
Did
he? He won his class here. I think driving for the Roush team. But there's a guy, IndyCar, off-road, sports cars, stock cars. The guy was a wild man. I mean, he could drive anything.
Yeah, I developed a good relationship with Robbie Gordon when I was covering races regularly at the Michigan International Speedway. They had like 2 or 3 races a year, 2 NASCAR, they had IndyCar. In fact, there was one year where they actually had 4. So Robbie Gordon was not only a great person to talk to, and I spent time in his hauler, but Robbie Gordon was a racing junkie if I ever saw. And everybody knows about the Andretti's. I know we're running out of time, but I want to bring up some interesting names in the past that obviously are what I consider the true definition of a racer. So Ron, I'll wrap it up with Ken in a moment, but anything else you want to incorporate into what we're talking about?
No, I just think it's great. One thing I just had a question about the bumps. How did the Sebring bumps be? They have a life of their own. People talk about fear the bumps. How did that happen? I mean, we know they're there, but how did they're like separate almost from the race. Like people talk about the bumps.
Yeah, they've taken on a life of their own. There's 2 spots on the track, turn 17 and turn 1, where they're really major bumps. It's the old concrete runways from Hendricks Field. But I came up with the hashtag 5 or 6 years ago, respect the bumps.
Oh, it was you.
Yeah, that was me. And then it caught on. All the drivers started using it, and it got on social media and so forth. And even we have merchandise that says, respect the bumps and all this. So it really is part of the character of Sebring. Not many tracks have their track surface as one of their talking points, but we're proud of it.
No broadcast would be complete unless I mention Richard Petty, Dale Earnhardt, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Let's talk about any of the three, and then we'll talk about this weekend, and then what we can look forward to for next week. So what about those three?
Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Sr. came to Sebring in 2000 and did a secret test for the Corvette team. And they were going to run Sebring and Le Mans for Corvette. And of course, Dale Earnhardt Sr. Was killed, that next year at Daytona in February of 2001. Junior drove an Emsa a few times for Corvette. Richard Petty didn't do any sports car racing. A lot of people don't know he did drag racing though for a couple of years. But one thing you did mention was the Andretti family. The late John Andretti, who just passed away last year, he raced sports cars, Indy cars, stock cars, and drag racing. One of the few to also do drag racing. So the guy, like most of the members of the Andretti family, was so versatile. Every discipline of the sport he would tackle.
Well, when you talk about John Andretti, Tony Stewart, and Robbie Gordon, what do they all have in common? They tried to go out there and race Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 race. So if that doesn't tell you anything about these three guys, I don't know what. So as we look ahead now, Ken, let's talk about this weekend, and then we're going to put you on the spot for next weekend when we get up there. So what do people have to look forward to this weekend?
This weekend, as I mentioned, it's a one-day event. It's like a little kickoff to our race week, and it's a really laid-back event. It's a fun event. It's only $20 to get in. Kids are free. So if you're in the neighborhood, please stop by. You're going to really enjoy it. It's a great way to just get started and learn about Sebring. As far as the following week, I think we're in for a really great event. I think it's going to be super competitive. I predict that it'll be a close event. I think the Cadillacs probably will be favored because for some reason they just always seem to do really well here, and they always seem to run really well at night. I don't know why that is. It's part of the tire technology, but I think Cadillac may be the team to beat in the prototypes, and I think Corvette's going to win in GTLM, and I think Lexus is going to win in GTD.
Any particular drivers that should stand out?
I am very curious, in addition to, of course, Jimmy Johnson, I'm really curious to see how Kevin Magnussen does in his first race at Sebring. His father drove here 19 times, and this is his first race. So I think Kevin's going to uphold the honor of F1 drivers, and I think he's going to do really well.
All right, and lastly, why don't you let everybody know how they can get tickets for the event and any way that they can do it. We still have some time for you to sell a little bit of tickets. Any other closing thoughts that you have before I go ahead and wrap it up?
Absolutely. You can buy tickets at the gate. You can buy them online or call our 800 number, 800-626-RACE, but it's the same price, so you might as well buy them at the gate. The gates open Wednesday, the 17th at 8 a.m. And it's a 4-day event. You can buy 4-day tickets, a 2-day ticket, or a 1-day ticket. And kids are 12 and under are always free at Sebring. And we also have an active military discount.
All right, I want to take an opportunity to dedicate this broadcast, Ken and Ron, to my mother who passed away just after Thanksgiving. My Aunt Judy, who died of COVID-19, and I know that my Aunt Tina's in serious medical problems right now. I don't know how much longer I have her, but if it weren't for her, I wouldn't be in broadcasting, and I wouldn't be in the company of these two fine co-hosts that I have on the broadcast tonight. So, and one thing I can tell you folks out there is my Aunt Judy died of COVID-19, and I'm going to tell you right now, and we've said it, and I'll say it until I can't say anything anymore. Please do everything necessary with every single protocol out there. Mask up, social distance, sanitize, and be safe out there, and anything else that we need to do, because you know what, it doesn't pay. This virus is anything, we're not out of the woods with this at all. We really aren't. And I know that you guys do a good job up in Sebring trying to do the best you can, but you know what, folks, do take all the necessary protocols that you have to do to stay safe. And we're very appreciative of the continuing relationship we have, Ken, with you. And I just enjoyed coming up there. And more importantly, I'm very happy to have you as a very good friend as well. And I look forward to it. So any closing thoughts before we wrap up the show, Ken?
Well, I just want to thank you for your support and your work, and we really appreciate it. You know, it's Sebring's a special tradition, and I urge everyone, you said it best, put it on your bucket list. You won't be disappointed.
Well, I know that when I get back up to Sebring, you and I will hopefully have some time to go out there and talk about other promotional opportunities and me finally having a chance to drive on the track. Things are something that I'll look forward to doing, because the more experiences I have up there, the easier it is for me to go ahead and convey them to all of our race fans out there for sure. So meanwhile, on behalf of Ken Breslauer and Ron Renzy, my name is Scott Morgan, Route the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange, and we will catch you the next time. Good night, everybody, and be safe.